Hey everybody, Eric Switzer here for another TG Roundtable. Joined today by Editor-in-Chief of the Year so far, Stacey Henley.
Hello.
It's July, it's the midpoint, so here we are to cycle through and revisit our games of the year so far. Before we start, let me ask you this. I think I've always felt like years go in cycles for games. Like we'll have a good one and then a not so good one. Same with movies, I think.
Yep.
Last year was the best year ever, probably. Maybe
Yeah.
the best year games have ever had ever and will ever have. So then you sort of expect that this year would be a dud, but I don't think it has been.
I think it's been a lot lighter on like the types of games that we've got. Like I've got a top five that I want to talk through today, but I only think three of them will be on the list at the end of the year, and I think they'd have been fighting for competition. So, but we've got a load of really great stuff coming up. I think it's always kind of tempting when you're playing games week to week and look at the kind of good games and go, yeah, this year's really good. It had like this game that I like. I think this year's been a little shallower than 2023, but 2023 started slowly. It wasn't really until Zelda came out that that torrent of a good game every week really picked up. So I mean, I don't think it's not going to be 2023 because we're not going to have anything like Alan Wake, Baldur's Gate, or Zelda by the end of the year. I don't think. I still think those three games will be better than anything that comes out this year, certainly at a AAA level. Um, but I'm happy with the games we've got so far. I'm happy about what's coming out. Um, I'll save my reservations on the whole year until the end. I think when it gets to the end of the year, everyone tends to go, "This was the best year ever," just because they liked a game, and last year they were right to say it. I think they'll still say it this year, even though they're not right to say it. But we don't need to get into that right now. We can just be happy, happy, happy.
All of the games on my so far list, except one, are pretty small games.
Mm.
Um, I know you've got a couple of triple A's on there,
Yeah.
and there were some big triple A's that passed me by, like Final Fantasy. But like this time last year, we would have already had Resident Evil
Yep.
4 and Hi-Fi Rush, which you may or may not consider a big game, but maybe I was already satisfied by some big AAA hits, whereas my list is very much indie stuff that I was really impressed by.
Yeah, I think my list usually is indie stuff by the end of the year. There's quite a few on my list that I haven't got to yet that I will probably shout out today. But so far, mine is looking more AAA flavored. I've got George's list here as well. George was usually on the show. He's not here today. He hasn't died. He's just not with us. But he has also gone for some more indie games, and that's not usually George's style. George is an IP guy, and his top game of the year so far is an indie game, which I feel a little bit shown up by when I look at my own list.
Well, he is a fan of many things.
That's true. He's a fan of everything, in fact.
Yeah. Yes, I also have a list of my backlog that we can touch on at the end. But let's get into the games. Are yours ranked?
I've done a top five, yeah.
Okay, cool. Hit me with your number 5.
My number five is a game that I was convinced while playing it was going to end up really close to the top of my overall list. And the more I played of it, it just kind of sunk down. It's still hanging on at the top five. It still might be in the lower reaches of me final list, but I'm less sure the more I played of it. And that is Dragon's Dogma 2, a game that I think
Mm.
starts well, lags far too much in the middle, and then has a really
Mm.
brave swing of an ending that a lot of people liked, and I was already kind of checked out by and wasn't as
Yes.
moved by as I know people were. And I think there's just a big void in the middle of that game where things should happen. It sets everything up really well, I think, the way it presents its world. It's got some big risks there. Dragon's Plague was obviously a really big one. Um,
Yep.
just wandering around feels enjoyable in a way that it's not always for me. I don't get drawn into the appeal of like Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild as much when people say you can go anywhere. I don't always feel, I guess, that sense of adventure within my game myself. But I did feel that, the calling in Dragon's Dogma, but a lot of the plot points don't go anywhere. The main story
Hmm.
really lets down some of the wider, like the wider world and the narrative beats just feel a bit empty when the main narrative doesn't really do anything to back it up. And I'm kind of conflicted on this. It's my fifth of the year, so I should be saying this is great, but kind of a reflection on the year that I think really it's not until I get to my top three that I'm ready to, go to war for these games. I
Yeah.
just think Dragon Dogma is good. It came out this year. I toyed with actually putting Last of Us No Return here instead, and I thought I don't really like that because it's a remake and it's an add-on mode. I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's a real full game, but that's my level of commitment to Dragon's Dogma. I was considering the Last of Us roguelite ahead of it.
Yeah, that's the tier it's on.
Yeah.
You want Dragon's Dogma 2 to be so much more.
Yes.
You can see the game that it could be. And it falls short in all the ways you mentioned, in narrative and in pacing, and the combat is great. I think that's why it's going to make a lot of people's lists, because it's very flashy, it's very satisfying, and it feels pretty unique to
Yeah.
that game.
And it encourages you to jump around classes as well, which you don't always get in RPGs.
Yes.
Like I play a
Love
lot
that.
of like Dragon Age and games like that, and games that I love, like Dragon Age, I do play multiple times, and I've been a warrior,
Mhm.
I've been a rogue, but it's really easy to switch between them in Dragon's Dogma 2. Which I think encourages you to do even some of the weirder ones that I didn't really like because you get like four near the start, and then there's four more that you unlock as you go.
Right.
I didn't really like any of those. I liked the starting four. Warriors probably
Mhm.
the closest, and even then, that just kind of felt like the whatever the original red one is. Warrior just felt like a bigger version of it, whereas the other ones are a bit more experimental. But
Yeah. They also don't give you time to grow into those classes. By the time
yeah,
you get them, the game's pretty much over.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel moved by those as much, but I like the experimentation that it kind of lets you do stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, and it has some pretty great set piece moments.
Yes.
Chasing that giant construct thing through half the map.
Yeah, we discussed that in the big breakdown. I hadn't actually done
Very
that at the time.
cool.
That's a really cool moment, I think, for the game. But as you
Yeah,
said, it
and
kind of then leads to nowhere because you open up like a shortcut and it's to nothing.
right, yeah, and then you fight the last boss right there
Yeah,
where that ends. Yes, I enjoyed it. I also got to the post game and gave up. I was over it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, might make my full list, but I'm totally with you. I think we're like on the exact same page with this one. Um, but still glad I played it for sure.
yeah. Definitely good game. I guess I expect that the second half of the year will have more games in it for me, not just the ones that are coming out, but a few on the backlog. So less sure about this or the next one. I'm sure I'm gonna get your five first, but
Yeah.
less sure that they'll be there by the end of the year when I'm sure we'll do this all over again. What do you have in number five?
My five is the game I completed most recently, so I'm
Okay.
not sure if it made the list because of recency bias or if I tucked it to the end of my list to counter recency bias, but
Okay.
it's one or the other. And that game is The Chinese Room Still Wakes the Deep.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to talk about this one yet, but it it is a very traditional walking simulator horror game.
Yeah.
It really isn't doing anything to push the boundaries, reinvent that genre. It has lockers you hide in and cans that you throw to distract the monsters, and you're trying to get from point A to point B. And that's it. But the presentation, the cinema qualities of it, and the theming around this Cthulhu like threat, this this cosmic horror event on a oil rig, a Scottish oil rig.
Even
It's very
scarier.
yes, it's very singular. You could point at things like The Thing, and other horror games like Outlast, and Amnesia. And there are plenty of games and and stories that are like this. But this very much feels like its own thing. I think I just said that about Dragon's Dogma as well, but
But
um,
that's the appeal of games sometimes. There are a lot of
yeah,
games that are quite good that aren't that original. I mean, look, I have gone to bat before for Spider-Man 2. I like games that are unoriginal but very fun sometimes.
yeah,
But games that bring their own spin on things, I think, are ones that tend to do very well in the gamers overall list, tend to do very well for us too. Slay the Princess, pretty big example of that from last year. Um, I do think games that have that uniqueness are a big draw.
yeah. And you also just appreciate a very polished, competent example of something. A lot of times we like games that have a little bit of jank to them, and you just appreciate it for what it is. But this is like a just a perfect example of a game of this genre. It's just like the pacing is great, it looks phenomenal, everything is smooth. The creature designs are really cool, really scary stuff. And I had a lot of fun with it. It was like 6 or 7 hours, and it really just felt like watching a movie, like playing through a movie.
Yeah.
And I always like that stuff.
And it's on Game Pass that one as well, isn't it? So
Yes,
anyone listening who wants to do it, pretty easier to dive into that one than some like Dragon's Dogma where it's like $70 and it's 70 hours.
that is huge for me these days. So many of the games I play are like full-time hobby games.
Yeah.
So I really love something I can play beginning to end in under 10 hours and get a complete experience. It doesn't want me to come back and grind numbies next week. That's huge for me right now. Yeah, I mean, if the easiest sell for this one is if you like The Thing, you should play this game.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people like that movie because it's great. Also, I can't talk about this game without pointing out its strangest quality. I don't know if you've heard this, but
Don't think so.
it is this. If you play with the subtitles on, it is translated from the Scottish dialect. They're speaking English, but they're using Scottish vernacular, and
Right.
and the subtitles translated into American English.
That's very strange.
It is bizarre, and I'm almost like, is this problematic?
How did you do with understanding it? Because I'm from something like 50 miles from Scotland. My accent doesn't sound Scottish, obviously because I'm not Scottish. But I'm from pretty close to Scotland, so there's a lot of crossover. I understand stuff. You're not from close to Scotland at all.
No. I would say 99% of it was like, why did I need that translated? When
Right,
he
yeah.
said, when the electrician says, me good with the lecky, I
Right, yeah.
know what the heck he's saying.
Right.
A lecky is electricity.
Sure,
We got it. But every once in a while, they'd throw something out that was like, what the heck is that supposed to mean? But I would rather just, I could look that up if they said something that, if they said some Scottish slang I don't know. I kind of don't want it to be translated like that, like they're speaking a different language.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like they do that every time someone has a thick foreign accent, like in movies, and I think it's maybe less problematic for Scottish people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Question for
yeah,
another
weird
day.
one. Still, I like the game a lot. Okay, what else you got?
Okay, so speaking of full sensitivity for all the cultures around the globe, my fourth pick is Tekken 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am the earliest game that I played this year. I think came out very, very early in January. I've loved the Tekken series. We've done a few videos on Tekken. Tekken is not my absolute favorite of them. I mean, 3 is my absolute favorite just because of the nostalgia of being one of the, not just Tekken games, one of the first video games that I played. When I first got my PlayStation, my mum brought 4 games, which were Tekken 3, Crash 1, Spyro 1, and Cooler World. So she got 3 out of 4 of those right. Did not become a lifelong Cooler World fan, but the other 3 have really stuck. And yeah, I like Tekken 8 is Tekken as a series has always been quite fast, quite focused on. I'm going to say speed of tactics. I'm sure the fighting game community will disagree and say there's lots of balance, but for casuals like me, Tekken's always been the fastest game, the most furious game, and they really leaned into that with 8, which makes it really, really dynamic to play with friends. The story mode is pretty good. I liked they brought in Reyna, they brought in some other like riffs on characters. I still think it's missing something. Like the older Titans have had bigger narrative modes, where they've become like beat 'em ups, and they've had that kind of element to them. I think it's still a kind of, you just fight and you do online stuff, which is enough when you've got friends who play Titan. Really good example of what a Tekken game is. Enjoyable, nostalgic for me, even though it's a new game, because Tekken always is. It's the only fighting game that really kind of gets me like that. All the other fighting games that come out, I think, are kind of just fighting games. They're all the same. But Tekken 8 just feels different. It's, again, probably not going to be even in the final 10 when we get to December time, because I'll have caught up on stuff and there'll be a lot more things coming out by then. But for now, Tekken's hanging on in there.
How's Tekken doing? Because we've had such a burst of fighting games in like a, I don't know, like a 3 or 4 month window, and Street Fighter was huge. Mortal Kombat didn't do so good. Where did Tekken land in there?
I think the big thing with Tekken was it didn't immediately go for the kind of model that Mortal Kombat did, where one of the big problems with Mortal Kombat was a lot of the modes leaned really heavily into monetization. Tekken didn't really have that much of an emphasis on that, but at the same time, we do kind of live in a live service world. People want new content every week, and I think they've talked about bringing in new characters. They've talked about, I think, a photo mode just added this week, or it's been added next week, something like that. So they're kind of slowly adding things, but I think Tekken had a really big burst of, this is really fun, I really like it, it's, Tekken, woohoo. And then it got like 2 weeks, people like, well, what's next? Like, well, there's no next. This is a full priced game. It has like 30 characters in it. You can play any of those characters as much as you want. You can play friends. Doesn't need to be a next. It's not multiverses. It doesn't need to go on forever. So I think the community in fighting games as a whole, as I've just said, I'm not a huge expert in like the esports, the Evo scene, but I think generally there's a little bit of a pushing back against, we don't want to be ripped off. We don't want to pay endlessly for currency, even if that currency begins with a K and it's really cool. But we also, of course, but we also want new content, also with a K, every single week. And I think Tekken could have done that and been more of a live service game, and probably could have sustained it a little bit better than Mortal Kombat, because maybe it's biased. I think Tekken has a wider cast, has a more interesting cast. Mortal Kombat, because it's been telling the same story over and over, and it's got this multiverse thing, kind of ties itself up in knots with who it can use and where and when. Whereas Tekken's just like, hey, Eddie's back. He's going to fight you now. I think there's a way for Tekken to go down that route. Obviously, with 7, they'd had like new characters and crossover characters. They had Final Fantasy 15 Noctis, and the guy from The Walking Dead, Jeffrey D. Morgan, can't remember his name. He was in it as well. So they've kind of struggled with how much of a modern game they want to be. But one of the other things, you said, like, you have these hobby games that you play. Because I play a lot of single player games, I'm kind of fine with it. I've bought Tekken, I've played it for 3 weeks. I'm going to play another game now. And I think people want it to be a hobby game. They want it to be a forever game. And I'm not sure it has the tools to do that. When you were a kid, it didn't either. But you didn't have school. You didn't have work. You just came from school. You didn't have any responsibilities. It was just school and Tekken, and your mom brought fish finger sandwiches to your room, and it was great. And life's not like that anymore. And so people don't like it. And they're not really missing Tekken. They're missing fish finger sandwiches.
Fish finger sandwiches.
Is that a British thing? Is that not a thing you guys have? No?
We have fish sticks.
Fish sticks. Fish sticks are fish fingers.
Sandwiches out of them.
Oh yeah, bit of bread, white bread, bit of butter, fish sticks, tomato sauce, ketchup. Yeah, absolutely. What you really want to have is a toast sandwich.
A toast sandwich?
Yeah, plain
Toast in
bread.
the middle?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so plain bread, toast in the middle, plain bread. British cuisine.
Wow. Yeah, I know a little bit about British cuisine, and it's too much already. Yeah, it's kind of a weird place now with multiplayer games because people don't want to feel like they have to keep paying for these games forever, and B, want to play these games forever.
Yeah,
So it's like, how do we? You can't really have both. Um, but the way people play games anymore isn't like when we were kids. They don't sit on the couch with their friends
yeah,
after school every day. They come home and they get online and they play Fortnite.
yeah.
So if a game wants to survive, it needs to. I mean, you're making the argument that the game doesn't want to survive. It's just it was $60 and it's a full game, and you can play it as long as you want.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's
then
it.
they're gonna make Titan 9. This is the I don't know
Yeah.
how much it sold on minutes probably back, but like their business model's been the same forever. It's the newer
Right.
games that do the live service model.
Yeah. Yeah, and then are more popular for longer, and then give the impression that they're more successful and more beloved because people play them for longer.
Yeah,
So then people buy more Street Fighter than Tekken. So it feeds into the culture around the game, which then affects how well the game sells too.
yeah. It's an odd one because with some games, I'm really against them adopting the live service model. I think it was a real mistake. We've mentioned multiverses, but I think
Mm.
it was a bit of a disaster to say we're gonna have content forever. Just put like 40 Warner Brothers characters in a game, and then in another couple of years sell us multiverses 2. You
Mm.
don't need to keep inventing stuff. But at the same time, I play a lot of sports titles. I've just had the preview for EA Sports FC 25 drop. I kind of played a little bit of that before they'd done the trailer. And my preview is it's last year's game. It's
Yeah.
just last year's game, but like this thing has changed and this thing's changed a little bit, and the stats are updated or whatever. So there's some games that I play a lot of, like the sport titles, and I'm thinking, surely the live service model is what you want, but they make money
Right.
off doing it that way. I think there's so many complex things behind the scenes that are all about what makes the most money as opposed to what's best for fans. And I know that was the Gamers Roundtable last week. I wasn't here for it, fortunately, but the money of the dark side of the money of the industry.
Yeah.
So I guess because I have a problem with that on an emotional level, I kind of root for Tekken just being its own thing, but I appreciate it's not a path to superstardom.
Mhm. Mhm. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I think that's far too much time on a game that
I'm
is
impressed
fourth
with
on my
myself
list.
for keeping it up this long.
This is the
Okay.
next bit where you say your game is World of Warcraft. Not going to keep up.
No, that's not out yet.
What's your number 4?
I want to talk about Prince of Persia.
Yep.
The Lost Crown. I'm a huge Metroid guy. That's been a lifelong love of mine, and I am so incredibly picky about them. I play a lot of them, and they always fall short for me because of this. Because I have Super Metroid on such a high pedestal that even like the last two Metroids have fallen short for me.
Yeah.
Both Dread and Samus Returns were, to me, not true Metroid games. That's how like ridiculous I am about this stuff. And it, to me, like it's everything had to be Super Metroid, and then everything had to be Hollow Knight, post Hollow Knight.
Yes.
And Prince of Persia is not Hollow Knight. And when it came out, George loved it, was blown away by it. It's probably on his top 5.
It's George's number 4, actually. You've got it in the same spot.
And I couldn't help myself from telling him why it doesn't hit the mark for what a Metroidvania should be in my mind. But with some distance from it, I think the things that it does well, it does exceptionally well. I think that its approach to upgrades and the things that make its combat system unique are actually kind of profound. The way that it works with the Prince of Persia time stuff is so clever and fits this type of game so well. I'm just pretty blown away by the way that you can. It's one of those combat systems where the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. It's not just what's the most efficient way to kill this bad guy. If you really care about style, you can really style your way through this game and do some pretty impressive things with the. I'm stumbling a little bit because I can't remember the name of the mechanic where you put a clone down
Yeah,
and then you can rewind yourself to that clone, but that clone holds the wherever you are in your animation.
yeah,
So if you key up a heavy attack and he's mid swing and you create that clone, when you revert back to that state, he
the
will
attack comes
continue
in.
through. Yeah. And the types of combos you can set up where you are bouncing the enemy into different versions of yourself, it's just so cool and nothing really like it.
Yeah, I think it's so what impressed me. I haven't played enough of it to know where it's going to fall on my list. George has been bugging me to play it really since it came out, and I'm maybe only 20% of the way through it, so I
Mm.
can't really make a judgment on whether it'll be on my list or not. But what has impressed me is how much it feels like it is actually a Prince of Persia game. It's not just
Mhm.
like a coat of paint for it. It's not just like we own Prince of Persia. We've made a Metroid game. Let's put the Prince of Persia in there. I know he's not actually the Prince of Persia, but let's put that in there, and that's a branding play. It feels like it's been designed with a lot of knowledge of how the series works, the different
Yep.
mechanics, which I think is what makes it impressive. Because I think you're right. A lot of other games in this vein have been our mascot does Hollow Knight, or our mascot does Metroid. Going further back,
Mhm.
this is it feels a lot more connected, I guess. And I unfortunately I assume this is not on your list, certainly not on mine. Tales of Kenzara Zao, which I was really rooting for, especially after
Yeah.
all of the kind of negative, I mean, racism. I don't know why I was looking for another word for that,
Yes.
especially after all the racism that was surrounding it. Um, Came out really kind of wanted to love. I think it's imperfect, and I think playing that and playing Prince of Persia, because they both use kind of similar ideas around like
Mhm.
chaining attack combos in a way that fits with how the character moves, and um, manipulating the Metroidvania space in a way that makes it more aggressive. You can really see the way that Prince of Persia elevates that, because Kenzara is fine,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
Prince of Persia just it feels so much more impressive in how it uses all of the different elements of a Metroidvania. It subverts things, it does things that you would expect, makes them more interesting because of the mechanics, and I think that just makes it a really compelling game. I do need to finish it because I think by the end of the year that has a really good chance of, I mean, the two games that I've spoken about so far, if Prince of Persia keeps up its momentum all the way through, I think it's a good chance it at least knocks those two off, even if none of them actually make the final
Mm.
cut.
Mhm. Also, some real bastard boss fights. Just
Yeah,
some real want to throw your controller across the room, in a good way.
yeah.
I
It
think.
wouldn't really be a Metroidvania without that.
Yes. Yeah. What's your next one?
So an indie game enters the scene for me for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. A game that you actually recommended to me, played it entirely in your recommendation. It kind of blew up after you'd said that, so I probably would have got around to it. But it
Mm-hmm.
is Balatro,
Yeah.
which is fun to play and even more fun to say.
The
Uh,
mark of a great game.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love Balatro. People who haven't played it, I think we've had a little bit of a debate about this because I don't think it's a poker game. You play a lot of poker. You know poker more than I do.
Yeah.
You feel it's a poker game with us. I don't think it's a poker game at all because you make up your own rules. I think it's a deck building game that uses cards, which is what makes it interesting.
Yeah. I guess we're just drawing the line at a different place.
Yeah, yeah. I think we both agree that it's kind of a great game. I guess what I mean with that is It basically, for people who aren't aware, you play poker against different bosses, and the bosses aren't really bosses, they're just numbers. You've got to get a higher score in a certain
Yeah.
number of hands by making poker hands. And the more you play a certain hand, the better it gets. So traditionally in poker, a pair is pretty low, and then like a royal flush is obviously very high. But the more you play certain cards, the more their value goes up, so you can actually build your deck so you can take like, oh, actually, I'm going to take 5 sevens rather than 4 sevens, then 6 sevens. So suddenly runs and pairs and stuff become a lot more valuable. So you invent your own rules as you go, manipulating the maths, and you can build some really wild combos with it. It's got like, it has jokers which make you do certain additions to the bonuses. You have tarot cards which give you certain buffs. The bosses that you fight all have different like nerfs that they inflict against you. And I think we both, you and then me, after you put me onto it, have told people at the game, I can, you've got to play this, and we go, it's a poker game, and they go, nah, I'm out. So that's why I'm keen to stress, I don't feel it's a poker game, in that I think a lot of poker games, you need to innately enjoy poker to play them and enjoy them. I don't think you even really need to know the rules of poker to play this one, which is why I think it has such a big crossover appeal. Because you make your own rules, as you don't need to know what's more valuable out of these two hands. Because the more you play one, it's that one.
Yes, but you need to know hands.
I guess so, but I
and
feel
the first thing you said was you play poker.
You do play, yeah, you do play poker, I suppose. I'm trying to think of an example of, like, I would say FIFA or EA Sports, if they used to call it. That's a football game or a soccer game.
Yeah.
But Final Fantasy VII, when you've got the little run around the pitch playing football,
Yeah.
that's not a football game. It's like more, it's like arcadey. I don't feel like I'm selling the it's not poker part well enough.
It's not a poker simulator.
Yes, that's maybe what I'm getting at. Yes. I don't think it's linked enough to being a poker game that you need to be able to play poker. And you need to know hands only in the sense that, 3, 4, and 5, that they're in order. 6, 7, and 8, they're bigger numbers. Like,
well, you need to know a flush, a straight flush. Like, you need to know the things that are very specific to poker.
To an extent, the game will tell you before you play them, and that you're not bluffing or gambling against anyone, which I think is a big thing that puts people off poker. You don't need to, like, oh, I'm only going to bet this many chips, and no, you play your best hand every time, basically, unless you're strategically trying to build up a better hand by doing something else. You play the best hand you have.
You are gambling every time you redraw your hand. That's part of the thrill of playing poker.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're arguing about this.
We both love this game. This is surely on your list somewhere, right?
It's not in my top 5, but
right.
It probably is. It's definitely in my top 10 so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad we spent so much time talking about them, because I was going to go, you like this as well. Let's move on to yours. No, I love Balatro. You love Balatro. We both love Balatro. It's fun to play. It's fun to say.
It's a game where numbers go up.
It is.
So it's a very easy sell for me. It's a game where big numbers go up really fast.
They go. You go from like scoring like 25 times 3 on the first hand to like it runs out of space. You get the little thing in the calculator and it just comes up with like letters to the power 14. You're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. Yeah, and like it's a roguelike.
Yes.
And
I do agree with that.
It has a progressive challenge, so you'll need to score a certain number of points each round, and that number increases. But it doesn't scale very linearly, so like you'll get a few turns in, and if you've been lucky or you've made some good buys on your little table where you buy your upgrades, then it'll be like score 5,000 points and you'll score 500,000 points and you feel amazing.
And then sometimes you'll be scoring so many points because you've gone really hard on face cards. And if you don't know what face cards are, that's fine. The game explains it, but they're the ones with the pictures on. You've got like you've got like, instead of the 12 that you'd usually get, you've got like 20 because you've bought them and you've put them in. And you'll face a boss that's like, you can't use face cards. And then you score like 12 and you eliminate it.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to say on this is, I remember my favorite moment playing Hades, which I know everyone loved, was
Mhm.
I was playing through it on quite an early run. I hadn't got to Hades. I hadn't beaten the boss. Um, and I got a boon from, I can't remember who, Poseidon, I think, that let you throw grenades. Just a normal Hades boon. You throw grenades, woohoo. And then in the next room, I got another boon that was like, whenever a grenade goes off, it does double damage. So I got that one. And then it was, whenever you're hit by something, you will automatically throw a grenade. And I just, through random luck, got a string of like 6 or 7 boons that were all based off like grenades happen. So I was clearing rooms
Mm.
in like an instant. And that happens in Balatro. You suddenly get like, the first time you get like, he has an extra 7. And then the next joke is like, every 7 you play is worth like a multiplier times 5. And
Yes.
then the next one you get is, you can turn any of these cards in your hand to any number you want. And you go, okay, 7, 7, 7. So you get
Yes.
to like have that sense of luck, which I think was what makes roguelites great.
It's the stack. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Binding of Isaac effect. Yep, I love it. It's so good. It's a real brain scratcher. Okay,
Well, you
me.
got third. Yeah.
Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden.
Wow. That
Okay,
I know you like this game. We discussed it, and we did this off like hidden gems. I think I
we
know you
did.
liked it. I'm surprised it's that high.
If there is one Banishers fan, I am that fan.
There might
If
only be a few
if
years.
there are no Banishers fans, I am dead. I am comfortable being the only champion of this game, though disappointed. Disappointed that the press and the gaming mass at large didn't seem to get it. Um, I I don't know why. I wish I could understand why no one likes this game but me. I just I love stories. I love film, and we are so starved for good video game narratives. Even our best examples would be terrible movies or novels. Like they don't have strong arcs, strong characters, good dialogue, just like all the markers of what makes a story good. We just don't get that in games very often, and I think this one does. I think this one is so cool. The the world is so fleshed out, and the characters and the choices they have to make, and the drama, the surprises. I just am so impressed by the construction of this game's plot and the way that you influence that plot with your choices. And so many games market themselves that way and never deliver. And this one really did. And nobody else likes it.
Do you
I
think
don't get it.
part of the problem I think with it is, it just doesn't feel. I don't actually know the numbers on how many was downloaded or played, but it just feels it hasn't really found its audience. Because sometimes games come
Yes.
out and they're disappointments. We universally kind of, or near universally, dismiss them and say that wasn't very good. We've had a few games like that this year where a lot of people played and a lot of people said were bad. I
Yeah.
don't feel that's the case with Banishers. I feel like it's a game that came out and everyone went, never heard of it.
Yeah.
Not really interested. How long is it? 40 hours now. No thanks. Not going to give that one a try. But other things to be doing in my life. Some people played it and didn't like it. I think it would be fair to say the reception generally has been mixed. It's not like everyone who played it loves it. You are right about that. But I do feel it has a smaller audience than you would expect a game of this scope and stature to have. Because it's like, it's Don't Not doing The Witcher, basically, isn't it? I know that's really redundant. I know it's not that. But that's essentially what this game is. And you'd think that would find a decent chunk of the audience.
Yeah. I you're right. Like nobody talks about this game. I've never seen a tweet about this game.
Yeah.
Like it's not in the zeitgeist at all. I will at least point out that it is both recent and all reviews very positive
Mm,
on Steam with 2,500
that's, yeah,
reviews.
a little higher than I
It,
would have thought, actually.
it's accolades trailer where they just splash the screen with oh no, I can't back up. They just splash the screen with review scores. Has dozens of 9 out of 10s. I don't know where they found these because the Metacritic score is not that high.
It's like 60 something, isn't it? The Metacritic, or 70 something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like Eurogamer Poland
Yeah.
and and IGN France. So the non-American sites got it, I guess. Game
Those
Grin gave
cookie
it a 10 out of 10.
Europeans. It has a 78, which is higher than I thought, but is generally low for a game.
Yes.
Games tend to score much higher than movies.
They have, since it's come out, added a free demo. I think that they understood that they needed to entice people in a new way. So Steam has a free demo. I don't know how much of the game it is. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the combat is decent. I think it takes a while to get good, and that might be part of the problem. Is it's very simple for the first few hours, and then once you get the gun, it gets a lot more interesting, and once you start upgrading some of the powers, it gets more interesting. But the way that progression is tied to choices, like specifically the points that you earn to buy upgrades uh are based on the choices that you make in the story, and I don't think I've ever played a game like that.
Yeah, from what you've said about it, it feels a lot more in tune with the morality system. A lot of
Yes.
games have had kind of good or bad choices. Maybe a little slide at the bottom goes, or you know, Solus disapproves. But it does feel like this is tackling that question on a deeper level.
Yep. Yeah. I guess it's sort of it's an evolution maybe of the way in Infamous how you have like the hero tree and the villain tree,
Yeah.
but they're not two distinct trees. You
Hmm.
have two types of points, and then how you progress through the tree, your path through the skill tree will change depending on which points you have more of. Anyway, that's very nitty gritty and far beyond the point of that. This is just a very cool ghost hunter story driven romance that I was just so impressed by, and am shocked that that nobody knows about it. So check it out. Check out Banishers.
Free demo available
Free
now.
demo. What do we got? We got two more each, right?
We do, yeah.
Okay, hit me with it.
I really am going for big guns here, which is not
Yeah.
usually my style. But probably a slightly controversial. Maybe it's not as controversial as Banishers, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yeah, it's a new one. That is my numero dos.
Yeah, weaker reception than you would expect from this one.
Yes, much weaker, and it, I think it is a game that it doesn't get worse as it goes on. That's not quite right what I'm getting at, but I think it deteriorates towards the end, and I think it one becomes pretty obvious that this is the middle chapter, which I think
Yep.
generally is pretty hard to do. We see that in movie trilogies and novels and those sorts of things. You have to give a definitive ending, but keep the wheels in motion for something that's coming. And I don't necessarily know that Final Fantasy VII gets there, but I'm prepared to give it the benefit of the doubt because I know Final Fantasy VII story. I kind of know a little bit where it's going. They've changed some things, but basically I'm on board with the overall direction. And I think before it gets like chapter 11, and you play as Katshi, that really is the point where the game for me is pretty close to what I think, not a perfect modern game in the way that the three I mentioned at the top of the show, Baldur's Gate, Zelda, and Alan Wake, can maybe put a claim towards being. But I think as far as a kind of casual, like Spider-Man, just kind of it's fun,
Mm-hmm.
you're going through doing stuff. I think for the first 10 chapters, Final Fantasy VII really nails that because it takes you through quite small zones where you can rinse them without feeling exhausted by them. The characters all have their own journey. Every one of the gang is telling its own story. They all get a little bit of not closure by chapter 10 because there's 4 more chapters to go and there's the whole of the game to go, but they're making progress through that. The mini games all offer a little bit of depth without feeling like they're detracting too much, like the card game is part of the world. I
Mm.
think from that point onwards, it gets a bit too big for itself, and the
Yes.
final boss battle it comes back to, I don't like at all, even without that horrendous restart battle from the first point, restart save, all that stuff that everyone hated when that popped up. I think they've patched that out now, but I just really I just really love Final Fantasy VII. I'm not a big Final Fantasy fan in general. I think Seven's the only one that I really have affection for. Like I like 13. I like 12. I haven't finished it. I got that years later, like as a gift after I'd said I liked Final Fantasy, so I'm kind of playing through that, liking it. Quite like Type Zero, which I know no one else does, but generally not a big franchise Final Fantasy ride or die. I never played 14, all that kind of stuff. But 7 just, I don't know, it's just a really, really special game. I think if I was, like, don't actually need to say it, if a while ago GQ did their top 100 games thing, I was part of that. And Final Fantasy 7 was one of the 10 that I submitted as I think this is one of the best games of all time. So I really love 7, which means that I give the remakes a lot of credit. I like that they've done 3 different things and they've been experimental. This is one of the most famous games of all time. They could have just polished it, sold it. Here you go. And they haven't. I feel like they've actually created something new with it. It feels like it's creative. And because it's the original team kind of going back to it, a lot of the original team going back, I just have a lot of, I don't know, respect for it, I guess. And that just, it makes me want to go to bat for it. I am definitely biased. 2020 was another year like 2023 that was really strong. Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, Animal Crossing, loads of other games that I'm not getting to mention. Final Fantasy VII Remake was my game of the year that year. It won't be this year because I mean it's not even game of half my year, but I'm always going to be a bit more favorable on Final Fantasy VII and the remake project than I think the general audience is.
I think when you take one game and turn it into 3, you're setting yourself up for a criticism about the length of the game.
Yeah.
Because I think automatically people are going to say, what are you stuffing in there to make one game last for 3 games? And I think the first one pulls it off pretty well, but it seems like the second one, it feels padded in a way that you must do when you turn one game into 3 games.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that. I think it's really strange because chapter 7, I think it is, when you go to the beach, you do the beach adventure and you get to play as Tifa and Aerith. I think most people, at least people who are enjoying the game, would say that's their favorite part of the game, and that's mainly new stuff. That's stuff they've added in. Like I said before, they have like a football sim in there. They have like different adventures that you can do around the beach, and it's a very chill chapter. But I like that it represents this kind of calm before the storm. That's what that part always was in 7, and they've expanded on it. So there's that part I think people really like. But then I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but like 11 and 12, and even some of the bits before that, when you go back to the same map and they've added new icons to it, I think there it feels like they've padded out a little bit more. So I don't mind that they've stretched things out. As you say, the first game did it pretty well, and that added a lot of extra stuff to Midgar. But it all felt like it was part of the world and part of this new journey. And I think there's parts of Rebirth that don't necessarily feel part of the world and part of the journey. You know, when you have a really small map and you've got like one tower to go and climb, and you're like, it's like a video game. It's kind of like, playing around with that a little bit. It's letting you do video game stuff to kind of lull you in, then you go into the dark, and then it's not doing it as a bit to kind of lull you into a sense of idyllic community. And you're playing an RPG, which is kind of how it feels when they start you out at a farm and it's like, go and save my sheep. Yeah. They're going, they're building Cloud into an adventurer. They're doing a Dragon Quest thing. But then they aren't. Then they go for it, and it's just like, there's just more sheep to save, basically, just in other forms later on, which lets it down. I look past it as a player, as a critic, and looking at everyone else, I completely understand why people don't look past it, and I think it is a weakness in the game.
How much of your affinity for this is just because of you love Tifa?
It's Aerith that I love, and a decent percentage. Yeah, maybe it's like 50% of all the defense that I have for Final Fantasy VII is based entirely on the fact that Aerith's in it.
My number 2 is Animal Well.
Nice. That's actually George's number one. I thought it might have, I
Okay.
suspected it would have been yours actually as well. Tell me why Animal Well is
It
so
was a 5
great.
out of 5 for
Yep.
me. We did a whole episode or most of an episode about Animal Well, and that was before you had played it.
I had not played it at all. It wasn't out at that point. It was the review video that we did originally for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still really big on it. What did you? I don't think we ever talked about it, but how did you feel about it?
Yeah, it's another one like Dragon's Dogma and The Last of Us, where it was kind of a contender for it.
Yeah.
I have made it close to what I know from you and from the internet and from being in, Gamerino land is not
Yeah.
the ending. I know the ending is the
Uh-huh.
start of the next. So I haven't got to I guess, the real game. It's kind of how I think you described it
That's
when we're
kind
doing
of
the
the thing.
review.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm pretty close to that. I guess I would say I have found myself frustrating rather than frustrated because I've never really been able to carve the time out to play it. Um, I have it on the Switch, which usually is really good for me because I that's good for really portable games, and I can kind of sit on the sofa and go through things, or I can take it to bed and play. But I just haven't been able to at the moment. I know you know this, but I guess the people that watching at home, listening at home, I'm getting married in like a month,
Yep.
less than a month, and I'm also organizing Gamescom for the Gamer again. So I feel like the reason my list is so AAA heavy is because I have dedicated time to big games that I know I can get a lot of um, coverage out of. Basically, I can write a lot about
Yeah.
Dragon's
Yeah.
Dogma. I can do a lot of stuff with Final Fantasy. And I feel like this, and probably a couple of others that we'll get to that we haven't had time for, like Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, is a game that I think in other years I would have really loved. Uh, I had Singapore game, can't remember what it was called. Space for the
Mm,
Unbound on my list
yeah.
last year, and I know it's different animal well, but that's the kind I played that on the Switch, and I was able to get really engrossed in it, and I wanted that for Animal Well
Mm-hmm.
and Laura and Laser Eyes. I just haven't been able to do it, so I don't feel like I've had the true experience. Because I've slugged through enough of it, I probably won't ever get the true experience, but I hope to go back to it because I know you are very big on it, which means you should be talking, really, not me
Yeah.
giving excuses. Tell me
Well,
why it's great.
yeah. Excuses. Fake gamer. Put off your wedding. Come on. We got games to play. Yeah. We love depth, and we love economy, and this is a game that does so much with very little.
Yes.
It's a solo developer making a pixel game in a pretty small map when it comes to these kind of Metrovania style games. And yet, every single pixel of this thing is packed with something to find. And you don't just walk up and find it, it is a journey. And I just am so impressed by that. It's also a very cool community experience. There are puzzles in this game that you cannot solve on your own, and it took because I don't, man, I don't want to give this away, but it's kind of past the point now that it matters. But there's a there's a mural in the
Yeah.
game, and people worked really hard to figure out what this mural means. And during this review period, uh, they gave us like a Discord server where we could try to figure out stuff together because they knew that
You
this
need
was
to,
part of the
yeah.
game. And as it turns out, every single person has a different version of this mural, and the puzzle couldn't be solved until we overlaid and put all the different layers of the mural together. Really cool stuff. Really, really clever stuff going on in this game. It is a non-combat Metroidvania, which puts it on a tangent from the rest of the genre. We talked earlier about like the core, like the Hollow Knight and how everything has to live up to that, and Animal Well sidesteps that completely by just using tropes to do its own thing. And I would like to see Animal Well likes, but I don't think like anything will ever be, I don't know, as good or as clever. um yeah, anything that tries to be like this will just be mimicking this. It's hard. It is what it is.
I think it's one of those things where it's so creative and intelligent that anybody who could mimic it successfully doesn't want to mimic. They
Yeah.
want to make things,
Yes.
and I think that's kind of the beauty and the curse of games like this. We never really get games that are like them because the only
Yep.
people that are really capable of doing it at any level aren't going to.
Are making their own animal
Yeah, which
worlds.
is good in a
Yeah.
way because
Yeah.
I don't actually know what inspirations Animal Well kind of takes for itself, but I'm sure there's a lot of like really strange, unique games in the mix that the devil have played and gone, oh, I can do something that's this
Yeah.
fascinating without just copying it.
Right. And on top of all of that, there's the atmosphere, the music and the sound effects and the weird animals.
The
Like
animals, yeah, big part
it's
of it.
also so flavorful and that kind of like immersive experience too. So yeah, it's really just firing on all cylinders. Just a pretty incredible game. Good job, Donkey.
Yes, Donkey game, Donkey's first game.
Yeah. And now we're on your number one.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see what yours is. I was convinced it would be Animal Well.
Ooh.
My number one, which for the record is actually also George's second on the list, and I think it'll be pretty damn high on the gamers overall when we add everything together,
Mhm.
is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
Yeah.
Going to be pretty hard to knock this one off the top of the list for me. I don't usually talk anything about my life on this show, but I guess let's doubly get personal. The day before this game came out, my granddad died. I was very close to my granddad, and he died of cancer, which is what the protagonist of Infinite Wealth is kind of going through. He's not terminal in the game, but he's very clearly enfeebled by it. There's a lot of discussion of like how cancer impacts you. It's not just like a thing that he has in the background. It's a pretty core theme. And they go to Hawaii, so a lot of the stuff is Elvis themed, or the
Mm.
chapters are named after Elvis songs. There's other kind of references to the king in there, and my granddad and me really from my granddad, really big Elvis fans. When when Granddad was cremated, it was too can't help falling in love. So I just felt very like connected. It was a really strange experience to be playing a game about cancer and Elvis the
Right.
day after my granddad had died, and just because these things happen, and it was kind of a grim thing anyway. But it was over Christmas, and lots of people unfortunately kind of die over Christmas. Um, it kind of took a while for us to get his funeral sorted with things, so I hadn't really had the chance to have that closure and say goodbye the way you do at funerals while I had to play Infinite Wealth. So I kind of picked it up. I knew Kiryu had cancer, but I didn't really know much about it, and I thought it would just be kind of a distraction because I really like the series and it's fun, it's goofy, there's like men in diapers and stuff. And I thought it would just be a thing that I could play and just laugh, not have to kind of think about things. And instead, and there's also a woman in there who is dying, an old woman who's dying, and the man wants to say goodbye to her one more time. There's like a lot of things that just hit home in the game for me. So just on a personal level, I think it's going to be really hard for me to think of anything that I kind of care about more than this
Yeah.
game. It's just a completely unique experience. I'm never really going to have this again. Like, I don't know, if my dad gets hit by a bus and then they make a song about getting hit by a bus and it's all like Janet Jackson music in there, then maybe I'll have this experience again. But realistically, I'm never
Let's hope
going to
that
have.
doesn't happen.
Yeah, if that happens tomorrow, I'm gonna feel like so silly. But yeah, I'm never going to have that kind of core experience again.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not really talking about the game. I've written quite a lot about the actual substance of the game. I think it's great. It's an elevation of the open world stuff that Infinite Wealth or that Like a Dragon did. Excellent story. Ichiban especially is a brilliant character, really refreshing in games. It's kind of, I don't know, nurturing masculinity that he has going on. I just think is a really infectious enthusiasm kind of character you really want to see yourself in. The game is, I love the combat system. It's learned how to do turn based when it couldn't really the first time. But realistically, I mean, it wouldn't really matter if it was a bit rubbish. I'd still really love this game because it just
Yeah.
means too much to me to have it anywhere else. Um, but yeah, George's Granite didn't die and hit it second, so it is pretty
Yeah.
good
It,
regardless
it
of that.
obviously means a lot to a lot of different people, and
Yeah.
maybe not on such a personal level, but people that have been with this series for
Yeah,
most of
that's
their
true.
lives.
That's another really good point, actually. Yeah.
This is such a inflection point, I guess. I mean, it's the end of the main character story,
Yes,
right?
it's a real goodbye to love, I think, for the series. We're
Yeah,
picking up with Ichiban. We've had him for 2 games now, but this, because they kind of dive into the kind of cancer stuff, it's a real rumination on memories and life and legacy, which again hit pretty hard, but
yeah,
also introduces a lot of emotion to the series for long-time fans. I haven't played it since the start. I kind of picked up once it got big in the West, which really was the arrival of Ichiban, and I've gone back and played a couple, but there's people at the site who've been playing it since they had to like import it and use fan games
right.
from Japan, like really, really connected to this series, and I think it was a really meaningful game to them as well.
Yeah. Pass me by too much to try to get into Yakuza anymore.
Yeah,
I don't have that kind of time. It's one of those deathbed games like Final Fantasy 14. I'm like,
yeah.
man, I sure would like to play through Final Fantasy 14. Maybe if I was dying.
I think if I was going to bet right at this moment in time,
Yeah.
I have this as our game of the year. I'm not supporting anybody. Don't know what anyone
Wow.
else is voting for. So at the site, how we do it is everyone gets a vote. We don't
Yeah.
like pick it collectively. It's done mathematically based on the number of people here who like Infinite Wealth and who I expect to have it quite highly. I would be putting this as our number one at the moment,
Mm.
but we'll
It's
see.
fighting against time because we also have sort of a recency bias when it comes to our game of the year.
Yes, a January game has never ever been nominated for Game of the Year. A December game actually has, weirdly. Smash was a December game that was nominated the next year, but
Mm.
January is the only month of the year where we've never had a Game of the Year nominee at the Game Awards. This
Mm-hmm.
year, Infinite Wealth and Tekken and Prince of Persia, which isn't going to get it,
Yeah.
they're both pretty viable. Maybe it's not Tekken, but it's in with a shout. Infinite Wealth, I think, could be the first January game.
Uh, Hi-Fi wasn't a January game.
February,
February
and
game.
wasn't up for Game of the Year.
Oh wow. All right.
Oh yeah, they've been at the ceremony, but never actually Game of the Year.
Okay.
What do you have number one?
Mine is also very personal. I'm surprised you can't think of it. It's pretty recent.
I
Pause
was
for
convinced it was going to be
consideration.
Animal Well. Yeah.
It's the final shape.
Oh, okay, yeah. I wasn't thinking of it because of the live service, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Uh, Destiny 2 had such a mountain to climb with this. They really set themselves up for failure by doing this 3-part grand finale, the 10-year conclusion to the saga of Light and Darkness that has carried through from day one, Destiny 1 until this moment. And boy, they sure pulled it off. I can't believe it. It really is everything you want it to be. And it's not just everything I want it to be, because the reaction to this is just unanimously positive. Everyone was blown away by what they did with the final shape, what they did with the story, what they did with the world that they made. We went inside God and to discover the world within the traveler, and it's a mind-blowing place. The way that they've reinvented the typical daily grind activities, just breathed so much new life into this thing that a lot of people felt like was at the end of its life. And I had such a immediate turn, and I can tell that a lot of people are on the same page as me with this, where it was like, I'm sticking through to the end. I have to see it through. And then as soon as the final shape ended, it was like, okay, what's next? Like, I really was fully back in with this thing that is part conclusion, largely a conclusion, but also like a promise of what's to come in a way that I think people really didn't expect Bungie to be able to do.
Yeah.
Boy, they really did it. It's such an impressive thing. I mean, Destiny itself is so impressive. There's nothing like it. It's so ambitious even now. Even 10 years later, people have tried to do Destiny
Yeah.
and discovered how impossible it is. It's like an impossible project. And through changing hands and lots of different studios working on this thing, they were independent, they were owned by Activision, they were independent again, now they're owned by Sony, and yet through all that they have kept this thing alive and growing. And the the final shape is just such a testament to like what an incredible product Destiny is that just no one else can do.
I said this on the roundtable a couple of weeks ago when we were doing Final Fantasy with Meg and Ryan. I'm not entirely sure they appreciate it, and maybe you wouldn't appreciate it either. But
Mm.
is the final shape, is that like the end game moment for Destiny? Because the end game, the Avengers,
Yeah.
was like a summation of everything that was going to happen, that had happened, and it wasn't really concerned with what was going to happen next. We knew it was going to continue because it makes money. Destiny, they've said this is not the end of Destiny 2, they're not moving on
Yeah.
from it, but this was like a full, not like a cliffhanger, not the end of the expansion, not just a story that
Right.
finishes. This was a full stop.
Well, there is a very clear next step. So, like with all Destiny expansions, it's the expansion drops with its campaign, and then the rest of the
Sure,
year
yeah.
is part of that. So, even though what sets Final Shape apart is that everything has led up to this,
Yeah.
and this was a big conclusion. But when the great evil was defeated, there was a very clear and natural next step to like what is the fallout of that, what has that power vacuum created in the universe, and now we have to deal with that. And it felt like a continuation there that I just didn't expect. I thought we were gonna slow things down, go to more simple smaller things, and then just sort of trail off.
Hmm.
And it doesn't feel like that at all. Now this could still be the end of Destiny 2 leading into Destiny 3, but we are immediately ramping back up into the next thing.
Right. Is because I think we were at Summer Game Fest when this actually came out, and I kind
Yeah.
of was hearing from you about the kind of a quite emotional reaction from some people to it. Is part of that because if I feel like Destiny is always kind of, it's so over, we're so back. I feel that's a cycle it goes
Right.
through, but it did feel like it was trailing off in a way that, to me as an outsider looking at the reactions, felt a little bit not unfixable, but a pretty clear trajectory kind of shrinking downwards after Lightfall. It seemed like that was a
Yeah.
really big attempt to maybe push Destiny in a new direction. Didn't really work. Obviously, you had the kind of external tragedy as well. I actually
Mm-hmm.
don't know who he plays in. Um,
Commander Zavala. Yeah, Lance
Zavala, yeah,
Reddick
with
passed
Lance
away.
Reddick. That was like
Yeah.
obviously a big part of that as well. It seemed like the mood was just really low in the community at that point. Is part of it that this has been, I don't know, something of a revival of that. It's kind of reminded people why they love Destiny in a way that just a good expansion wouldn't have done. Like it need this emotional weight behind it kind of helps it with that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really complicated because of how big this game is and how long it's gone on. There is there's a big problem with the long-term structure of Destiny that at this point it seems cannot be fixed,
Right.
not without starting over. Because even though their formula worked for so long, eventually people get tired of the same thing,
Sure.
and they have made it an attempt to restructure the game this year. They have given up on seasons and switched to episodes, but episodes are just a different kind of season, and it's clear that there really isn't a way between like the actual design of the game, like the hard coding of the game, and the development pipeline at the studio, that they're not going to be able to shake up Destiny 2 in a way it needs to keep growing. Um, and so when you look at the final shape numbers, they're not better than the Lightfall numbers. And that was community wise like the real low point
Yeah.
for Destiny. And yet people were playing it more then than they are now. Yeah, it just when if you're talking specifically about like the player count and the viability of Destiny 2 going forward, I think it does need to come to an end now. But that doesn't mean
Right.
Destiny has to come to an end.
Yeah. I guess I'm just mean more from a vibes perspective. It seems like the people who actually care about the game, the people who are
Yeah.
going to put it as their number one game of the year, I don't know, just felt like after Lightfall, I it feels as an outsider it was an expectation that it was going to end on a bit of a sour note, that it was
Yeah.
just kind of in a slump that it wasn't necessarily going to be able to fix. And it seemed like, at least narratively, which is all anyone really cares about. No one who plays it actually cares about the numbers. You might say you do to try and win an internet argument, but realistically, if the game is enjoyable, that's the thing you care about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really have not heard, you'll see a Twitter comment that's nonsense, but you'll see every single opinion on
Right.
Twitter, right? But I really don't I think this is like a unanimously beloved execution of the end of the story. Um and yeah, will that carry through the rest of the year? Probably not. It's already really fallen off.
Sure.
People are already mad at the same stuff they've been mad at for a long time again. But man, for a moment, Destiny had everything.
It's the same problem that we discussed with Tekken. People don't want to be charged every week, but they want new stuff every week.
Yeah,
It's still a cycle of you can't have the campaign chapters every week, because
yeah,
unless you're Concord, they're going to do it.
right. Somehow, new cutscene every week. Yeah, we'll see about that one. Okay, great list. Hey, let's do our. I have some things on my backlog that I think could probably end up in my top 10 if I gave them the time.
Sure.
My first one I just started. You mentioned it earlier, but I'm a couple hours into Lorelei and the Laser Eye.
That would also be my top choice, I think, on there.
I can tell it's a heck of a game.
Yeah.
It is. This is a classic Myst style adventure game. It's not first person. It's more of a isometric.
Yeah.
Not even isometric. It's like old Resident Evil. It's like fixed camera angles, and it's really expressionist
Yeah. Expressionist
camera style. But you start this game with 2 items in your inventory: keys to a car that doesn't work and tampons.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a start.
It's a really bold introduction to like the sort of thing the game is going to do. I've only had like a couple of rooms in the main building, so I'm not very far into it. But yeah, I think it could end up being on my list. I know we at the site, I haven't played it, but we give it a 5-star. Feels like the kind of game that could earn that from what I'm playing. I think you can get a sense early on if whether a game could be a 5-star. Because sometimes the vibes are just kind of off from the start. It feels kind of derivative, or it feels janky. This doesn't. This feels like it has the kind of, I don't know, chutzpah to get there.
Yeah. I'm gonna be big on this one. I just need to make the time for it. But I have started. What else you got?
That would have been my first pick. I guess what I should share is between us, we've gone through 4 of George's top 5. The other one, which I'm not sure will be on my list, it's not really my thing, but another Crab's Treasure. So another big one from this year that I think, and not a Souls player myself,
right?
But it seems like a nice, cool like reinvention of the Souls whole deal. So we'll be checking that one out. Like I said, it's in George's top 5.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned Still Wakes Deep, haven't got around to it, but everything about that appeals to me. I won't go over that again, though.
Yeah.
So I guess the ones I'm kind of trying to find the list now of things that people at the site have recommended. I think Crow Country and Indica are the 2 that appeal to me. Of these are games you should play to get ready for your Game of the Year list. But I don't like thinking about playing games that way sometimes, but it's also kind of unavoidable when that is the reason I'm playing them. basically.
Right. Yeah.
Like I want my list to represent me and my taste through the year, and that means I need to seek out other games because, as we've seen from this year, and I've not really been able to, I just kind of say, here are some big games that I've played and one indie that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my lists at the end of the year usually have a bit more balance than that. I'm still hoping they will second half of the year, but yeah, those are the two that I've got my eye on to seek out.
Yep. Yeah. Crow Country is on my list too, as well as Cryptmaster.
Yes, it's come out quite recently,
Won,
that one.
yeah, won a bunch of awards at GDC. Our editor Tessa really fell in love with it, so I definitely need to get to that one. That one looks really cool. Harold Halibut is the stop
Yes,
motion thing that took 15 years to make or whatever. That's something that I've got to play. You know, that's a really one of a kind game. So that's on
experience.
there. I missed Pepper Grinder, and I
Yes,
played like 15 minutes of it at a PAX last year and had a blast. So I really want to get around to that. I don't know if that's the kind of game that'll make my list, but it seems like a very short, very fun,
yeah,
kinetic action game. Um, I a little bit lower on my backlog. Pacific Drive. I
yeah.
wanted
I've
to give a
played a bit of that
chance.
at Gamescom. I'm
Yeah,
into it, but it's out and I haven't bothered with it. So that kind of shows you how into it I was, I guess.
yeah. And then another one that really passed everyone by that still appeals to me is Outlast Trials.
Yeah, that did kind of come and go.
It's co-op. It's Saw, right? It's
Yeah.
like playing a Saw movie but with your friends. I thought that seemed really cool. But nobody really talked about that one much.
No, I mean it's not even on my list to get to, so
Yeah,
that's how little impact it had on me, I guess. But I have heard things about it.
yeah. Cool. Anything else?
Don't think so. No,
All right.
I'm looking forward to the second half of the year. Just try and get a little bit more flavor on my list, but generally happy with it.
Yeah. Cool. I hope those are good recommendations
Yeah.
and people kind of find some of the stuff that maybe they haven't heard of before. That's it for this episode of the TG Roundtable. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's The Gamer, no spaces.